Do you want to go first, Andrew?
Andrew?
Done. No.
Have to be done.
Over to you. What's your role at 6Clicks, Andrew Lawrence?
Well, I've fairly recently come on as the Chief Technology Officer. And what about yourself, Andrew Robinson?
Pleasure to have you on board, Andrew Lawrence.
Thank you.
I am one of the co-founders alongside Ant and Louis and our Chief Information Security Officer.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so you're the whether we should, and I'm the whether we could.
And together we see through the weather, something like that. So let's talk about responsible AI.
Yeah, sure. So where should we start?
Maybe you can explain where we're at with AI development and technology and maybe some of the benefits.
Yeah, okay. You mean in terms of 6Clicks or in terms of in general?
You can start with a 6Clicks example would be good, and
Yeah,
then maybe we can extrapolate that to some other industries as well.
Yeah, well, 6Clicks, it's in the GRC industry. And it's an interesting time because I think, I was thinking about it. Okay, segue. So prior to coming onto 6Clicks, I was working in the property valuation industry. And that's also interesting. They've started to value property using machine learning techniques. But when you think about property valuations, they've already had like mathematical and statistical techniques at valuing property. But when we think about GRC, there hasn't really been like an algorithmic way of wrangling the data that we have, which is natural language data. So all of a sudden we've got this new technology, this AI technology, which is very good at working with natural language and processing it in a way that almost appears algorithmic. I mean, it is algorithmic. So yeah, it's really quite interesting. So 6Clicks is taking full advantage of the plethora of new technology that's coming out, and so we've got quite a lot of things in the works.
There's some particular use cases where we've delivered AI already that are able to help customers with GRC?
Well, I mean, the first types of things that we looked at was in the matching sort of space. So similarity matching is really what it is, which is quite simple but enormously useful, as you would know.
Find stuff fast.
Yeah, because I mean, you can probably talk about that better. I mean, why exactly is it useful to be able to match one set of questions, for example, or a set of assessments with another?
Well, I think a part of the principle or methodology was to look at what data we had, because machine learning models need training data, and we looked at the 6Clicks content library and saw a lot of a language of which we could run a natural language processor over. And I think the other thing would be relatively low risk. So when in the early days, when we started playing around with machine learning over 3 years ago, we wanted to take something that's low risk, and that public source information for the most part is a lot safer to trial and learn from than using customer data. So I think that there are a couple of the key reasons, but the real value of from doing compliance mapping was to look for the overlap between standards and start to deduplicate the efforts of compliance people so they can do something once and benefit many times rather than having to do the same thing over and over and again.
Yeah. Because from what I understand in your sort of position, what happens a lot, you go away and get ISO 27001 certified, audited, the works, and then along comes another customer and they've got a new
yardstick, a different
set
standard.
of questions set, and hey, can you fill this in by tomorrow? Because if you want our business, so it's enormously useful for you to be able to
translate between the two, and reuse as much as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a really interesting and genuinely useful use case, which I think is it's cool.
And many more in the works at 6Clicks. What about if we expand our horizons beyond 6Clicks? You mentioned the property valuation. What about what kind of impact or benefits do you see in sort of financial services or in healthcare or something like industries like those? Is AI being applied already, and can it be enormously beneficial, or is it a waste of time?
Well, I mean, I think there's certainly, I mean, and we'll get to, I guess, responsible AI. There's certainly a lot of things to be concerned about, but I mean, clearly when we start thinking about healthcare, that's something where unarguably there could be so many huge benefits.
Diagnosis.
Yeah, I mean, I actually just got my skin checked the other day because, I shouldn't be living here in Australia. My background is Scottish if you go way back. They're using image recognition on your moles, and they've been doing that for a little while. And when you think about, I think skin cancer being, one of the biggest killers in Australia, unarguably that would be massive if we could really get on top of that.
Life-changing benefits to many people. Yeah.
So so I think it's important that we really continue pushing down this artificial intelligence path. But there are clearly some risks to be mindful of. Which you'll be thinking deeply about at the moment.
Yeah, and we started with talking about 6 clicks, and where we started with public domain data, the risks are relatively low, and in the world of GRC. But then you start talking about something like health data, which is pretty sensitive to a lot of people. I don't necessarily want their health information in the public domain or other people querying it. So I think that's when not only do the benefits go up, but also the risks. So maybe we can talk about what some of those are. I have read a lot of information in the public domain and see a lot of posts on social media right now, and what I see is a lot of lists, and I go, well, a list is nice, but how did you get to the point of creating that list? And that's what you have to look at, that process of creating the list to determine how comprehensive the list is. So I recently started trying to reverse engineer a threat assessment and risk assessment based on understanding the components of AI, maybe which you can explain some of those in a moment. And I use that as the starting point for understanding exactly where are the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in a system, and then we can talk about the risks, because if you do that, you can get an understanding of, well, have we considered any risks associated with this component, or have we completely forgot a risk to that component? Have we looked at the inputs and the outputs that are that component's depended on, and have we considered those in our risk assessment? It's an easy way to cross-check that list, make sure that it's comprehensive. Maybe you can start by explaining some of the components of AI, and then I can jump in with some of the risks that I've started considering.
Yeah, well, I mean, many of the components equally apply to non-AI technical solutions, which I
don't assume anything.
Yeah, let's just call them traditional technology. So if you're running an artificial intelligence system, it's backed by some sort of database. Nothing really has changed there. I mean, there's a shift towards vector databases recently, but at the end of the day, it's a database. The networks are all the same. What's changed is the model has now entered the picture. We now have some sort of model. It could be a large language model or whatever it is, and that has, I guess, some novel risks associated with it. Is novel the right word? I don't even know what that is.
Sounds important. I think novel's good.
Novel or
creative,
things that are
new.
Yeah, things that are unique to artificial intelligence, particularly in that it's a black box. Really, even the brains trusted OpenAI can't tell you how ChatGPT is getting the answers that it's getting. They can't unravel that for you. So this creates, I think, and this is something quite new. Like historically, with any type of computer code, you've always been able. It might be really complicated, but you've always been able to really get in there and figure out that.
Explain it.
Yeah, explain how exactly it's getting the answers that it is. But it's now the point where really a lot of these models are kind of almost inexplainable.
Yeah.
This is one of the challenges we had in the property valuation industry, because if, for example, a government is using, the local government areas are using using property valuations to derive taxes, someone could object to that tax in a court of law, and then they want to know, well, how exactly did you derive this property valuation? And if you said, well, I just asked this black box, it's not really going to stand up. So
that gives me a few ideas.
yeah, just object. You can go ahead and object. So now that the model is in the picture, I think this is really where this is the crux of many of the risks and considerations that we have to have.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I look at the machine learning model and then I think about some of the inputs, perhaps a little auxiliary but still very relevant. So the first one would be the training data. In the 6 clicks content we talked about the content library, but maybe there's a whole bunch of other data that you're using to train the model, numbers or language, and then you've got the prompts, of course, coming in from users. It could be written typed prompts that we're familiar with, using tools like ChatGPT. But the one that we talked about before this session and in the days leading up was really around sensors. And when you're looking at sensors that are either videos, microphones, temperatures, readers, whatever it happens to be, then they're another key source of data into the machine learning model and potentially subject to influence. And I think when you include the sensors, then I think that frames up the risk, because the impact is so much greater. If sensors are feeding an autonomous vehicle, for example, that's a lot riskier than using ChatGPT, for example. So it's like by looking at the components and the inputs and outputs, you can get a read on different scenarios and different causes and impacts to feed into the risk assessments.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And on the output side, you do need to consider. If we look at, say, some of the things that have been in the news in Australia around Centrelink and the Robodebt scandal, for example, we have a case where, that wasn't, from my understanding, I don't think that was artificial intelligence per se, but it was where, I guess, there was a misuse of technology to influence in a very real way the lives of individuals. And that could easily be something that 6 clicks could slide into if we're not careful. We're looking now at things like the risk profiling applications, where we could profile the risk of engaging with a company as a vendor. But if we get that risk profile wrong, or drastically wrong, that could potentially open us up to defamation, etc. So we really need to be considering, quite carefully and cautiously, what are the inputs to these systems, and how are we assessing the outputs, for the potential for bias or for the risk that they could expose us or our clients or other people to.
I like where you're going. As a cybersecurity practitioner, I'm always thinking about the malicious user. But then there's this new category. Well, it's not really a new category, but it's a very important category to the success of AI. I call them own goals. It's where you accidentally do the wrong thing by not being aware of the right thing. So if you're selecting data to train your model that is subject to bias, then you're going to create an algorithm that's going to be questioned in the future when the impacts become known. So there's the malicious use of AI, the influencing training data, either through prompts or through the sensors or through the infrastructure compromising systems. But then there's those own goals to watch out for sure. Did you know there's standards evolving in this space?
I had heard from someone. Yes.
So there's lots of technical standards and that are coming into play, ISO and otherwise. There's also a lot of principles being thrown around as well. But the two that I'm thinking of specifically are the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, which gives you a way to understand or seek to understand the uses of AI in your organisation, weigh up those risks, put the right controls in place. It's fairly high level, but gives you a good system for unravelling what you should do. And then something that's more specific would be ISO 42001, which is a new management standard for artificial intelligence, which is still in the drafting pre-publishing stage, but should be out pretty soon. And that does a similar thing in making sure you've got policies, risk assessment and controls in place to manage the risk associated with AI, and adds on around 39 extra technical controls that need to be in place beyond policies and roles and responsibility to secure development as it relates to AI, addressing supply chain risks, other interested parties, introducing some transparency into your use of AI. You don't necessarily need to do that so much with cybersecurity, which is goes to addressing that explainability question. This is our machine learning model. This is what we do to protect it. So I think those standards are going to help drive responsible AI. What do you think about some of the principles that are floating around when it comes to responsible
Well, I was going to
AI?
ask you, where do you think the authorities, do you think they're ahead of the curve here, or do you think they're behind the curve, or do you think there are, it does seem like there's been quite a rapid conversation that's happening.
There is, the last 12 months.
Yeah, which is good to see. But is the conversation happening too late, do you think, or are we,
I
on
don't
top
think
of things?
it's too late necessarily, but it's not before time. So in Europe and now the UK, they're pretty much at the forefront of AI-based regulation, and only recently has the US got on board with a new executive order on responsible AI. Australia's been putting a lot of guidance out there, principles included, but there's not a lot of legislation or regulation that I'm seeing here in Australia yet. And I think that's something that's going to follow. The regulators of each industry need to understand the use cases, whether it's in healthcare, like we talked about, or financial services, or property, or insurance, or then it's those regulators that need to understand the use of AI or various uses of AI in their industry, and then help people understand the risks and the controls, and slowly lift standards commensurate to that risk.
I always thought when I cast my mind back, I think to the real big when privacy really became a hot topic, which I can't remember, but it must have been about the mid-2000s. And I think it eventually they decided, okay, we have to have a message on every single website that asks if you want to accept cookies or not. Which I always thought was a little bit.
You can thank the GDPR for that one.
I think the conversation that was happening at that time, I felt like the government wasn't really on the same page as where the technology was at. But I think now it has progressed, hasn't it? Now you got some really great minds thinking about this stuff at a high level.
The intent's there. Everyone understands the importance, and so everyone's, not everyone, but almost everyone, at least from a politics, government and industry perspective, is on board with responsible AI. It's really the only way we can secure the benefits that we're thinking about, is to make sure that we mitigate the risks with responsible AI is a good way to go about it. It's such an interesting dimension for me, because it's more than just the technical side. It's making sure that we're building the future that we want, and not allowing a bad or negative future to enter into the mix because we haven't thought about it, haven't planned, and haven't put in the controls to mitigate it. Is the future as you see it, is it bright, or do you think?
Well, a lot of when people ask that question, I think what springs to mind for a lot of people is my job secure? I've got my hustle going. Is that being threatened? It was interesting because I asked a friend of mine who's he's an architect and he's in design, and if I was in design, I would potentially be quite scared of seeing something like Midjourney that's able to generate just any image that you ask it to. But it was interesting, his answer. He was insanely in love with it. He thought this was, design was going stale. and
It's going to empower him.
Yeah, it was going to open new frontiers of an explosion of art and new abilities for him as a working professional to produce more output.
The optimist.
Yeah, so he was quite optimistic about it, which I thought was interesting. And I think I'm very much on the same page as, I guess, an engineer, at least for the moment. I think there's a lot of things left undone that need to be done, and that we simply don't have the time and resources to getting around to. So being able to finally address those things and sort of finally get around to fixing some of these problems, that's quite exciting. So yeah, right now I think there's a lot of really great use cases, and I think I'm relatively optimistic, I think. Yeah, what about yourself in your sort of industry?
I'm optimistic that we'll continue to learn and do better with AI responsibly. So yeah, I agree. We really don't have a choice. If we want to improve the world we live in, artificial intelligence gives us a really great capability to do that. And it's about creating the future that we want and locking that in. So I think there should be more talk around what is the vision of the future with AI integrated into our lives. What do we want to see in terms of use case adoption, and what don't we want to see? I think if we can create more stories and conversations around those things, then we can all keep it in mind and go about our jobs on a daily basis to make sure that we lock that in and we secure those benefits.
Yeah.
So I'm quite optimistic. If I look at cybersecurity specifically, again, it's we've got no choice, that we're actually being attacked, or adversaries are being enabled with artificial intelligence tools. So in order to keep up with that pace, AI is necessary. It also gives us a way to finally get on top of the large number of logs that are coming in and surface that to make better decisions and faster responses. So that's a world I look forward to, and I'm sure my team does as well.
So do you think that the ChatGPT style technology increases the threat from bad actors? I mean, because there is a theory that the poor spellings and the simplicity of attacks is actually a deliberate feature of those attacks, rather than in terms of finding the people who are more easily exploited. But in a situation where at scale you can generate very large amounts of content or even programming code, is that is this are we in a world where the threat from that is greatly heightened?
We are indeed. One of the things that I did researching recently was look at the real world incidents that AI has enabled, and a lot of that relates to chat bots and the devices you put in your homes that you can give commands to, and some of the content that they've spewed out when manipulated. But certainly then there's been a whole range of other attacks that have been enabled through artificial intelligence, either in the discovery of the vulnerability, scanning code, the execution of it, speeding up the development of exploits. So 100%, there's no doubt in my mind that artificial intelligence is speeding up the rate of attack. If we take your example around misspellings and things like that, phishing emails were the first go-to using ChatGPT. You can finally craft a message with good English instead of bad English. Not only can you do that, but you can throw in some information around the company you're targeting, the person you're targeting. If they have a public profile, lots of information on the company, you can actually craft that message and turn what could have been a generic message into something much more specifically crafted to the person that you're looking to phish. So I definitely think that ups the ante, and therefore we need artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to detect that kind of behaviour, and ideally strengthen our environment to make sure that those attacks aren't successful. Gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, for sure. I must keep you awake at night as well, I'm sure.
Some nights, but hopefully not too many.
Yeah. Well, this has been an interesting conversation, but it sounds like we've got our work cut out. So
we do. CTO and
Yeah.
CISO in an AI-driven company.
Yep.
So we're definitely looking at folding responsible AI into everything we do and sharing our lessons learnt with our customers and the broader public.
Yeah, well, thanks for the chat. We should do this more often.
I've enjoyed it. We definitely should, Andrew.
Okay. Bye-bye.